Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Chris Meaney here with you. Another edition of Mean Streets here live on our FTN YouTube page, following along on iTunes and Spotify. Always appreciate your guys' support. If you are hanging out live and you have any questions, you can always leave them in the chat. You can always reach out at Chris Meaney on Twitter and meanstreetsftn@gmail.com. It's been a few minutes, a few days since I've checked in with you guys. So I wanted to check in, recap the Super Bowl. Not going to spend too much time on it, but did want to share some thoughts on what I thought was a pretty entertaining game. Poor execution on both sides to start the football game, but on the edge of your seat in the final quarter, certainly in overtime. And man, the Niners let one slip. They had him. They had Mahomes and company, but Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl champs again. So we're going to get into that. We'll take an early look, a way too early look at the Super Bowl odds that came out right after the game. And of course, the 49ers, I say, of course, I don't think it's correct, but the Niners are Super Bowl favorites for 2024. We are going to talk NFL free agency on this show. We're going to take a look at the running backs. I have them ranked. It doesn't really matter. We'll rank them once we find out which teams these guys are going to sign on or sign with, rather. So I got 10, top 10. We'll talk about it from a fantasy standpoint on the show to come in the next few episodes. We are going to talk NFL draft. We are just a couple weeks away from the NFL Combine. We are going to talk mock draft next week. Mike Randall's going to join me. We're both going to share our NFL mock drafts. We have Jeff's and Mike's live over at FTNfantasy.com. MLB betting previews, recording the first one tomorrow with MLB Dream. We're going to roll through all the teams, all the divisions. We're going to split them up, not have them all in one episode, but look for that. Vlad Sedler, the man behind our fantasy baseball draft guide, which is live over at FTNfantasy.com, rankings, projections, all kinds of articles, cheat sheets, every single kind of strategy, whether you're a head-to-head player or rotisserie player, high stakes, best ball, it is all live over at FTN Fantasy. And we're going to share some of that stuff on the show, rankings, projections, targets, sleepers, get you set for fantasy baseball season. So working with Vlad, next week, he's going to join me. We'll take a look at the top of the board from a fantasy baseball perspective, get some tips from him from a strategy standpoint. When's he targeting pitching? How is he attacking the first two rounds of the draft board? As you know, Mean Streets is a multi-sport show. It doesn't stop. Football doesn't stop, but we are covering all the sports here on this show. So look for that to come here very soon. MLB betting previews, fantasy baseball previews, target sleepers, busts, NFL mock draft. And of course, the draft is very soon in NFL free agency. We're also going to talk dynasty buy low, sell highs, all that good stuff here. Those hanging out live, appreciate you guys. Again, smash the like button. I have a couple promo codes for you too as well that I wanted to share. FTNHOOPS over at FTNDaily.com and FTNBets.com. I got two links inside the description of this video, bringing you to both of those websites. 35% off at the moment. It's all just to get us excited for March Madness, right? A couple weeks away from March, one of the best times of the year to be a sports fan in March. It's all happening. Baseball's around the corner. You're going to have a Masters around the corner. Tiger Woods at it this weekend, the Genesis Invitational. And, you know, the NHL and NBA getting into playoff time, and then everything in the NFL free agency and draft. So March is a really fun time to be a sports fan. This is a pretty good deal. 35% off FTN Daily, which includes tools, projections, Discord channel, optimizer in the NBA, in MLB when it gets here, PGA. So you can sign up monthly or the annual, and you're going to get all the projections and all the tools. We have an amazing new Pick'em tool. If you are on our YouTube page right now, I put up at the top the video with Alex Blickle explaining the Pick'em tool, the edges that we get from simulations to try to put some extra cash in your pocket. It's not a prize picks tool. It's a pick'em tool, but we are using some of the prize picks props, and you can use that for your sports book as well if you're not a prize picks player. But FTN, the promo code over at prizepicks.com, they'll match your first deposit 100% up to $100. And we have all kinds of prize picks plays in the Discord channel. The tool is awesome, and I've seen a lot of people have some success, including myself already. So FTN bets, Kutry has won over 100 units in college basketball, and Josh Gross has won over 100 units in just WNBA, women's basketball. So we wanted to give them some love as well. And again, FTNBets.com, you have all of the picks across all sports, my hockey, my basketball. I don't, I'm not a college guy. I mean, I watch it, but I'm not going to just give picks for the sake of giving picks. We have goats over there in Kutri and Mike Randall giving some college basketball picks. Walter Riddell covering you on the college basketball side here from a video standpoint and DFS here at FTN. So just wanted to, touch base with you guys. It's been a little bit, and those promo codes, I think it's a really good time to jump on board. Any questions that you guys have, reach out to me. Again, meanstreetsftn@gmail.com or at Chris Meaney. DMs are open. Slide on in. NBA Rigged, welcome in. Howdy, Chris. Happy Thursday to you, sir. How's your morning? Who's chat today? Question: did anyone win money on Super Bowl betting? I think we did okay as a show. We were on Kansas City. We were on the under 47.5. We just got that. We had to sweat out the Chiefs. We talked about Kansas City at plus 750 over at DraftKings and Sports Illustrated. If Casey was just trailing at half, it didn't matter if it was by 1 point, 7 points, 10 points. A bet that you make before the game, plus 750. I saw a couple people have some success with that, and from this show as well. Shout out to Jennifer Piacenti of Sports Illustrated, who dropped that here on the show last week. And again, it did happen. Another come from behind victory by Kansas City, which we're, I guess, used to seeing at this point last year in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, and then this year against the Niners and against the Niners in 2019 as well. So we did have some success, and we're not going to sit here and pat ourselves on the back for some of the bets. But this is what we went with. I think we went 4 for 7. Pacheco just shy. We had the attempts. McCaffrey just shy. Kelce balled out. Only 1 catch for 1 yard in the first half, but he picked it up in the second half. Debo didn't get there, and MVS did get there. We also took down the one and done pool at Sirius XM Fantasy, and some people have reached out to me, and all good, man. It worked out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. As George always says, sometimes good, sometimes shit. It did work out. We had a good showing over there. We made a last minute switch from CEH to McKinnon. I think I squeaked out a 3-point victory over Dan Glaskins of Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. So lucky to get be on the right side of that. But overall, from a San Fran side of things, from props, I mean, unless you bet unders, you weren't hitting anything, right? I mean, credit to the Niners defense just getting into that game, or the Niners defense played pretty good, actually. But credit to the Kansas City Chiefs defense is something that we stressed on this show, that not enough people were talking about how good this defense was. And Ayuk, Debo, and Kittle combined for 86 yards. Where were those guys? The reason we faded Ayuk was L'Jarius Sneed. He's certainly going to get paid, and an absolute baller here this season. Fantastic. That's what he did to wide receiver ones all year long. He shut them down. Casey was number 5 against wide receiver ones using some of our DVOA statistics versus defenders versus skilled position players. And just overall, like Spags, right? I mean, that's an extension that's certainly warranted that he had that he received this week. KC played. Think about the run that they had here. Their offense looked stale all year long. Middle of the pack, picked it up near the end of the season. Just okay throughout the playoffs. So like Miami, they didn't have to do too much. Baltimore, they started strong, didn't really do anything. They were good against the Bills. They were lacking some players in the defensive side, some injuries and whatnot. And they started off very slow in this Super Bowl. And it wasn't until the fourth quarter they got going and into overtime where they really got going. But it was their defense. They played the top 6 offensive squads in the league in Miami, Buffalo, Baltimore, and San Fran. Top 6 offenses. They combine on average nearly 30 points, those 4 teams. And KC gave up, on average, in the 4 games, 15 points. Talked last week about the adjustments in the second half, the 32 points in the last 8 second halves. And I think San Fran got maybe 9, and then overtime, 3 points in there. So they got a couple points, a couple scores, but still didn't do a whole lot. And there were some adjustments from Spags in the second half. So the defense last year, the youngest to win the Super Bowl. And then this year, still fairly young. And they have some signings to do. Like they got to take care of Jones and Snead. So we'll see what this team looks like defensively next year. But man, what a run, right? I mean, what can you say? 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years. It's the dynasty. It's very similar to the Pats dynasty. that we talked about over a 5-year span, 3 Super Bowls, 4 appearances, 5 conference titles, 4 division titles, a 15-2 record. Mahomes, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, struggled in the first half of the game, but when the game was on the line, he hooked up with Kelce a bunch, Rashee Rice down the stretch, and used his legs like he did in last year's Super Bowl as well. Cruise past his rushing yard prop at 25.5. And oh man, I don't know what else to say. Like, I'm not ready to say that he's the GOAT. Jake Seal and I were getting into a bit of a debate on his show yesterday. Brady's still the GOAT. Montana's still ahead of Patrick Mahomes, but the trajectory, the path that he is on is greatest of all time, right? It really is. And I believe that he's more skilled than those guys. It's not a shot at Brady. I thought Manning was a little bit more talented, and certainly his play call, the designs, I guess it's not really play calling designs, but the audible, the line of scrimmage, changing the play. Manning, there was nobody really better at reading defenses than Peyton Manning, I don't think. But Mahomes is certainly on his way, and Andy Reid's coming back, and Travis Kelce's coming back, and Kelce, hit career lows in terms of yards per catch and didn't have 1,000 yards. Definitely would have got it if we played in the final game of the season, but looked a little slower. The offense led the league in drops, offensive line penalties, all that stuff, and they still found a way to get it done, and in a different way on the road. Dogs against Buffalo, dogs against Baltimore, dogs against San Fran, and found ways to win. And it was just a gift from Vegas. We were on KC throughout the entire playoffs against the spread. I did have Baltimore beating them on the money line in that conference championship game, but the spread picks were pretty solid all year throughout the playoffs at 10-3 showing. So not super surprised with the outcome, but I do feel for San Fran fans. It's another heartbreaking loss for the Niners and Shanahan. And we can sit here today and talk about, there's a couple things that I'd like to get off my chest is just, I guess, game changers. There was one, I think, where the game turned was the punt where it went off a San Fran defender and Ray McLeod went to go pick it up. It looked like Ray was just trying to pick it up. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to touch that ball? But it did hit a defender's leg and he tried to grab it. And I thought the turning point was right there. But I mean, to start the game, there was just miscues everywhere. CMC with the fumble, Pacheco with the fumble, Mahomes with the pick. There was just, it was sloppy football early on. But the longer KC hung around, you could just kind of feel the momentum switch and kind of feel like Mahomes and company were going to get this done. At no point did it ever feel like they were out of it. And there was a turning point for me in the second half and how the third quarter started. Pick it up, 10-3, San Fran, start of the third quarter. A 3-and-out, KC starts at the ball, 3-and-out. San Fran gets the ball, boom, up 7. Their first 3 possessions, each one of them resulted in 3-and-outs. They had -2 yards combined. On the 9 plays, they threw the ball 8 times. Purdy had a good game. I thought he had a good game. Certainly Jones and the lack of covering him in key situations and blocking him. There was a couple plays Jones, there was 2 touchdowns for sure where Jones got in the way, right? There was a play deep in the end zone to Debo that he overthrew. And there was another one where Juwan Jennings, I thought he beat his man on a route, and it was like a corner end zone throw that he had to get rid of it pretty quickly. But I really question the play calling in that third quarter. I don't think that Shanahan played scared. He was aggressive. He was aggressive with his play calling. He was aggressive. He didn't settle for 3 points. They went for it on 4th and 2 and threw to George Kittle for the first down. He was aggressive as a play caller. He really went after it. But I thought they should have used CMC more. Christian McCaffrey had 22 carries, but 6 of them came in overtime. And you can see when they went to him in the fourth quarter, when they went to him in overtime, they were moving the ball pretty successfully. I was shocked watching that game in the third quarter on those 3 possessions and seeing CMC only get 1 carry. I just didn't understand that. And it was way too early to run clock and just, kill the clock, which is something that Shanahan's taken a lot of criticism for in the losses in Atlanta as a play caller with the Falcons and what was the first overtime game in the Super Bowl, and this one being the second one. And really a lot of people not knowing the rules, Niners fans in particular, that was the difference to me. Shanahan versus Andy Reid, Mahomes versus Purdy. And it really was the reason we were on KC as a show here. You heard, whether this is true or not, but you heard from the KC side of things, Mahomes and Reed and other, they had a plan for this. They had a plan before the season started if they played in the Super Bowl and it went to overtime. They were well aware of the rules, that there would be 2 possessions. They said, Mahomes said it himself. He said, Reed probably not going to want me to say this, but we were going to kick the ball. And we were going to go for 2 if San Fran scored. There were players that came out after the game, Bosa, I think there was another guy too on defense, that they didn't even know the rules. And I get it. Hardman scored a touchdown and he didn't know they won either. So it's always, in hindsight, you look back and people say things after that may not be true. But at the end of the day, originally I was thinking San Fran, maybe you take the ball because your defense was starting to get gashed, right? Mahomes was starting to run all over them and they were moving the ball pretty easily, that I was thinking maybe they're tired, start, score some points, play it that way. But thinking about it all, I think just kick the ball and then you know what you're working with. Do you stop them? Great. Field goal wins the game. Do they score a field goal? You got to get a field goal. They score a touchdown, you got to get a touchdown. But you also have 4 downs. And if you notice in that game, KC went for it on their own side of the field at 4th and 1 with Mahomes, and Bosa ran at him, and that's what was happening in the 4th quarter and in overtime. Not a lot of blitzing, but certainly a lot of blitzing from Spags getting after Brock Purdy. But there was some blitzing in that late in that game after Mahomes, and you just don't blitz Mahomes. But you also don't want to give them 4 downs. I wonder, do they go for it on 4th and 1 on their own side of the field if they started with the ball? Like, I don't think. Maybe, right? Reed's pretty aggressive. It is Mahomes after all. So looking back at that, maybe that was the wrong choice, but they didn't lose the game because of that, right? They didn't lose the game because of that. It was just a good game on both sides. It was certainly entertaining. And Steve Wilkes is the scapegoat, I guess. He got the boot. He's fired. Shanahan relieved him of his duties yesterday. You could see watching the game when Shanahan called the timeout, they kept running cover 0 and Mahomes was just taking it like all day, like quick check downs, quick, slant to Rice and slant to Kelce and running himself. And, you could see it on Shanahan's face. He was just like, no, we're not calling that again. We are switching things up here. Nick Bosa after the game said they weren't prepared for the read option. That probably didn't help Steve Wilkes' case. He didn't get fired because of the Super Bowl game. I don't believe that. It's like all year long. Maybe the scheme isn't something that Shanahan liked, but the numbers were great all year long for the Niners. I mean, they held KC in check, 19 points before the overtime. On the season, 17.5 points allowed, was number 1 in the conference. 303 yards, pass yards allowed. That was pretty solid. I mean, these numbers are better than DeMeco Ryans' numbers in a 2-year span, and he got a head coaching job elsewhere. Like, he was rewarded for the work that he did in San Fran. So somebody has to get fired. It's not going to be Shanahan. But I thought Shanahan, like, not having his guys prepared for the overtime at all is just a massive red flag. Like, how do these guys not know? How are they not prepared? KC's been prepared since training camp for this moment. And that's the difference between winners and losers. It really is. So that's it. No other real takeaways. I thought CMC should have got more touches on the ground, needed to find a way to get some of these other guys involved. I was really surprised with the lack of usage for Kittle. Jennings was winning routes and doing a lot of good things. He had a heck of a game. He probably would have been the MVP. He threw for a touchdown. He had a receiving touchdown. He was really, really solid, luckily in our one and done lineup as well. So that's it, man. Kelce has a big game, another big game, right? I mean, he just flipped the switch in the playoffs. He was fantastic in all 4 games. Where does he rank next year from a fantasy football standpoint? He's going to be behind Sam Laporta for me. He's probably going to be behind Trey McBride. I do expect Arizona to draft a wide receiver. It could be Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll see how the draft unfolds, but Kelce will still be a top 3, top 4 tight end in fantasy. And maybe I'll have more shares of him this year because you're not going to have to spend a 1st-round pick on Travis Kelce. If he falls into the 3rd, maybe 4th round, I'm certainly going to be interested. He's coming back. Reed's coming back. The whole band's coming back, most likely. KC will be back again, and they could be the first team ever to win 3 straight Super Bowls. Just an unbelievable run, and you just have to respect it. You really do. I know Mahomes rubbed some people the wrong way this year with these guys showing adversity and the sportsmanship, all those things, the comments to Josh Allen, the frustrations. I mean, Travis Kelce almost rolled over Andy Reid. What was that all about? I think he crossed the line there a little bit. I get it. He was fired up. He wasn't on the field. He's not known for his blocking. It resulted in a turnover. Pacheco lost the ball there, but they all played. They all flipped the switch when it mattered most. My goodness, it was crazy. NBA Rigged here asking some questions. We'll get into all that here in a second if you want to just hang on. So I do want to say, again, FTNHOOPS.com. I think we finished pretty strong. I don't want this to all be about me, but 26 units over at FTN bets. We were up 18 units on sides, 11 on props. We were -8 on futures. Big takeaway for me, maybe less futures in my life, and maybe more unders on futures. I was really excited about Garrett Wilson. Had the over on his yards and the over 7.5 on his touchdowns. I didn't expect Rodgers to go down, but these things happen. Unfortunately, in the NFL, there's a lot of gruesome injuries. Players' seasons are lost, and it does result in some of these futures. There was a couple that I thought we were going to get. Baltimore at 10-1 for the Super Bowl. We had that at midway through the season. We had Carter for the Eagles to get Defensive Player of the Year. He did not get it. Super close. That was 4-1. I thought we were going to get that one too, but maybe more unders in my life when it comes to futures. The one under that I had was Aaron Jones rushing touchdowns. We were lucky enough to get that one just because he missed some time. But the overall straight picks that we tweeted all year, 189 and 96. And again, FTN Hoops is the promo code for you, but you guys aren't here to listen to me talk about my bets, my picks, but just want to give some love to the promo code if you are looking for an FTN package. So again, the look ahead here, the combine coming up, free agency coming up, the draft coming up. We're going to have you covered from all aspects, and we'll have some props, and we'll talk about landing spots and what it means for fantasy and all that good stuff here. So as I mentioned, the Niners, according to DraftKings, open up at plus 550 as the Super Bowl favorite. I'm surprised. I am. I'm shocked. KC should be. Why aren't they? Like, really, why aren't they? Back to back. The defense, Mahomes, Kelce coming back, Reed's head coach. I'm sure they're going to bring in somebody. Maybe they draft another wide receiver to go along with Rashee Rice taking the leap forward. I think Rice is a top 15, borderline top 15 wide receiver next year. Mahomes, I'll have a quarterback 4. It's going to be Allen and Hurts and Lamar ahead of Mahomes, but still, even on a down year, he's still like, the ceiling is just so extremely high for him. So KC checks in next at plus 650. We have Baltimore at 9-1, the Bills at 10-1, Detroit at 12-1. You got to love Johnson coming back to Detroit, right? That's huge. When your offensive coordinator comes back, I mean, ask the Eagles, right? They were a bloody mess with a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, no experience with those guys really at that position. This year now bringing in Vic Fangio, bringing in Kellen Moore, those guys at least have some experience. I expect the offense and the defense to be much better in Philly. They are 20-1. Miami 17-1. Cincy at 13-1. Green Bay and Dallas, along with the Eagles, as I mentioned, all at 20-1. The Texans at 22. The Jets at 25. The Chargers at 25. Long shots at this moment. I mean, for me, I need to see free agency. I don't think we're going to see lines change too much. I need to see free agency. I want to see the draft before I start laying any future bets at all. But the Rams and the Browns did kind of stand out to me as decent long shots at 35-1. I don't believe the Chargers at 25-1. I still think that they're going to be, I think that in 3 years, like maybe they're a contending Super Bowl squad. They need a lot of work still, right? It's nice that Jim Harbaugh's back, and he's a really good coach. He turned San Fran around, and he's going to turn this thing around in LA, but they're up against the cap. I think they need some help on both sides of the ball, but it's the 25-1. I don't think is a good bet, but this is a team that I think will be on the rise. It just, I think that they're just usually a little bit overrated, in real life and in fantasy, just a touch. But those are the Super Bowl odds, and we're going to take a look at the free agency running backs here in a second. Since you're hanging around here, NBA Rig, that was the other turning point. I meant to bring that up. The block extra point was killer for San Fran. It really was. Yeah, it made it just so KC could get those field goals and tie the game up instead of getting touchdowns, because I thought the San Fran red zone defense was pretty solid. That was definitely another turning point in that football game. No question about it. What else you got here? By the way, condolences to your Eagles this postseason. I thought Jalen Hurts had it in him this year, but for some, yeah, he floundered. Do you like their coaching moves so far this season? I do like their coaching moves. I'm not crazy about Vic Fangio. Just kind of felt like we let go of one of his disciples, but everywhere he's gone, the defense has been good. He has a game plan. I don't think that the Eagles have the personnel for his scheme, but he is a good coach. He's done some really good things. Hey, he could be the interim head coach by November. I don't know. It's very possible if the Eagles start slow. Sirianni could get the axe. He kind of plays conservative defense a little bit, nothing over the top. I like the Kellen Moore hire. I do like the hire. He uses a lot of motion. And I thought the Eagles offense was pretty stale last year. Where were the rushing attempts from Jalen Hurts? Where was the rushing? Like, I thought we'd hear after the season that he was hurt. Maybe he had a bum knee. Didn't hear about any of that. Just felt like the offensive play calling was very, very stale. You got to have guys in motion, right? KC, game-winning touchdown. It was the exact same play, the corn dog or whatever it is with a little bit of mustard and ketchup, whatever Andy Reid says. It was the exact same play that they ran on the Eagles last year's Super Bowl. They had it for Kadarius Toney on the right side of the field, Sky Moore on the left side of the field. They used it McKill Hardman this time. Right? You got to have motion. You got to have guys in motion. You have to. It's a new NFL, and the Eagles just didn't run motion, and the Chargers ran a bunch of it last year. So I'm excited about Kellen Moore. I think he can help out the offense, and my goodness, what a fall that was for sure. Which team do you think had a better chance of beating KC in their playoff game, San Fran, Baltimore, or Buffalo? I thought Baltimore had the best chance. I know it was as a pick 'em, basically closer to kickoff for San Fran. I thought Baltimore had the best chance just because of their defense. But again, Spags just got after Lamar and company. Baltimore didn't run the ball for some reason. In hindsight, looking back, the Bills had the best chance. They played them the toughest. They scored the most on them. They were right there in that game without a missed field goal at the very end of it. So I thought Buffalo probably gave them the best go despite San Fran going to overtime against them. If KC didn't have a stellar defense this year, that would have won this year, especially without a top wide receiver from Mahomes. It was the Patriots blueprint. Yeah, it was really all about the defense this year. It really was. The defense was phenomenal, and they had the edge against San Fran in every category, and they were top 5 in almost every single category in terms of yards allowed, passing yards, points allowed, yards per attempt, completion percentage of quarterbacks. They were great all year long. They really were. So one more here from NBA Rig says he believes Josh Allen had the best chance in their game in the playoffs versus Mahomes. He was better than Lamar. Lamar pooping his pants and Brock Purdy was not as scary as Josh Allen. I can't argue that, dude. Josh Allen had a really good showing here. So we're going to wrap up with NFL free agents. We're going to do running backs here today, and we're going to take care of the wide receivers in the next block. There are a couple other running back free agents that I left off the board that I want to share with you before I share the top 10. So there's actually some decent names out there that could maybe help out some teams. For example, let's start with Antonio Gibson as a third down pass catching running back, Jerick McKinnon, AJ Dillon. I know he hasn't looked fantastic over the past couple of years, but AJ Dillon. Will Rashad Penny get a touch or two in the NFL? Why didn't he get any touches with the Eagles? Kareem Hunt, what does he have left to offer? J.K. Dobbins coming off another significant injury. Cam Akers has dealt with a couple of injuries as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe a new landing spot for him, will be decent. Cordell Patterson. So there's some other names that are not on this list here that I'm going to share with you guys. But these are the top tier running back free agents as we creep closer to NFL free agency. And I'll list them off 1 to 10. I haven't planned on ranking them. They're just kind of listed here. But for the people that are hanging out with us live, you can see the board here on our YouTube page. But for those listening on iTunes and Spotify, I'm going to rank them for you. Number 10 for me would be Devin Singletary. Singletary racked up 800 yards on the ground for the third straight season, 4.2 yards per carry, 4.6 for his career. He touched career highs in terms of rushing yards, 898, and carries, 216, 30-plus grabs for the fourth straight season, 29 as a rookie. he surprised me with some of his games this season. 26 for 121, 16 for over 100, 22 for 112, 30 for 150. He took control of the backfield. He probably reached his ceiling. I don't expect him to perform much better than he just did. 130 plus fantasy points in 3 straight seasons. Probably nothing more than a flex play wherever he does line up. Maybe more suited as a third down pass catching running back than a guy that will consistently rack up 20 plus carries. But when he got the work, he did have some pretty decent games for the Texans. Number 9 here is D'Onta Foreman of the Chicago Bears. Offered very little for Chicago due to a crowded backfield. Had some moments when Khalil Herbert and Rashawn Johnson were sidelined. He's not a big player in the receiving yard game, but he could carve out a goal line role depending on the team. He's not going to be the lead anywhere. It's nothing really to get super excited about, but he does have 9 rushing touchdowns and over 1,300 yards on the ground in his last 2 seasons, while really splitting time in Carolina and splitting time in Chicago this year. Number 8, Gus Edwards set career highs across the board, carries $198, yards 810, rushing touchdowns 13, only 12 catches, but that was a career high for him. 175 fantasy points, also a career high. He scored a touchdown in 8 of his final 10 games in the regular season. He was part of the best rushing team in the NFL, a team that ran more than anybody in a neutral game script, and they ran the ball very well. Of course, Lamar Jackson had a big part of that success, but Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, both likely gone. Maybe Keaton Mitchell time perhaps in Baltimore, but he is coming off a significant injury. Maybe the Ravens signed somebody else on this list. But Gus Edwards, 4.9 yards per carry for his career. Kind of a one-trick pony, heavy, downhill type of runner. Don't expect him to be the lead running back on the Ravens next year if he does sign, or anywhere else that he does sign as well. Number 7, Ezekiel Elliott, career low 3.5 yards per carry, but showed he still has some juice left in the tank. Played on a very bad New England Patriots squad that could not move the football at all. 50-plus catches for Zeke for the first time in his career. Not a lead back anymore, but a decent goal line back, a decent short yardage back, maybe a 1-2 punch with a guy like Tony Pollard. Efficiency drop over the past couple of years, though. 4.2 yards per carry, 3.8, and 3.5 for Zeke. Number 6, DeAndre Swift. A really good season from Swift. He returned value on draft day in fantasy football. RB24 in points per game. His first full season in the NFL. He missed the final game of the year. Everybody was sitting out. Actually, that's not true. Not everybody was sitting out, but he did sit out with an illness. But career high in terms of rushing yards, over 1,000 carries, 229, 4.6 yards per carry behind a very good offensive line, 4.7 for his career. Career low in terms of targets and catches. Only 39 grabs, 49 targets. He didn't get the dump offs from Jalen Hurts that he had in Detroit, but he did show us that he can handle full workload and goal line work, which is something that just he didn't get in Detroit. Jamal Williams was always taking those. Like that year, Jamal Williams led the league in rushing touchdowns and red zone rushing attempts. But Swift had some games. You know, he cooled off in the middle of the season, but he had 4 games, at least 18 carries, which is something that just didn't happen much for him in Detroit. He's still a really good player in the receiving yard game. He has more to offer than what the Eagles gave him. He's like a 50-plus catch guy, I think. We'll see where he lands. The Philly boy could land back in Philadelphia again, and maybe we just have a little bit of a feel on how they would use him and how they would utilize him, but certainly could have had a few more rushing touchdowns if not for the brotherly shove. Number 5, Tony Pollard, one of the fantasy busts of the year, drafted as high as RB3, finished RB 15th overall, but RB 22 on the season in points per game in a half-point setting. Pollard was given a bell cow role, but he failed to live up to expectations. The O-line was good. The offense was good. He had 1,000 yards, but only 4 yards per carry, 0 receiving touchdowns, and just 6 rushing touchdowns on the season. Only scored in 5 games last season, despite having the second most red zone rushing attempts in the NFL, 60, just behind Christian McCaffrey. Pollard had 13 carries inside the 5, and he only finished with 3 touchdowns. He missed Zeke. He's a good back. He's not great near the goal line. Kind of needs another running back to carry the workload. I thought he was better as a change of pace guy. 3 games last season with 20-plus carries. He only topped 17 carries in 3 games last year. I thought a very disappointing season from Tony Pollard. just not a between the tackles kind of runner. Like, not, he is and he isn't, because he's so explosive and he's great with the ball in his hands and he's a good pass catching back, but near the goal line, just not big enough and not great as a short yardage back. And it just wasn't I just don't think he really lived up to expectations this year. And I don't think he's going to remain a Dallas Cowboy. I think he's going to go somewhere else. And I don't think he's going to be the lead there. It's going to be a bit of maybe a timeshare depending on where he goes. Austin Ekeler, number four on this list. Austin Ekeler, RB23 in fantasy points per game, limited to 14 games, 3.5 yards per carry, by far the lowest mark of his career, 4.6 for his career overall, 4.4 in each of his previous 3 seasons before this past year. He did have 51 grabs. He did have 107 in 17 games in 2022. He's averaged 74 catches per season over his last 5. With Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman back together, these two want to run the football. Austin Ekeler never had a season with over 206 carries, just 200 plus in 2 of his 7 campaigns. He only topped 15 carries twice last season and 3 times in 2022. I don't think he's the type of runner that Harbaugh and Roman want. I do believe that Austin Ekeler will be on another team, and he still has a lot to offer in fantasy. He's very explosive, one of the best pass-catching running backs in the game, but also somebody that you just really can't bank on 20-plus carries a game. That's why I think the Chargers will go another way. Number 3 on this list, Saquon Barkley. Giants fans, you know the saying, if you love something or someone, sometimes you just need to let them go. Be free Saquon, free Saquon Barkley. RB12 in fantasy last season, despite missing 3 games. Injuries have been an issue for Saquon over the course of his career. The O-line wasn't great in New York. The quarterback play wasn't great. The weapons weren't great. Couldn't move the ball. But RB9 in points per game, like, he still has the upside to be a top 5 running back in fantasy football on the right team, behind a good O-line, behind a good offensive play caller, behind a team that has a good quarterback with some weapons. 3.9 yards per carry last season and for his career, but 40-plus grabs in 3 straight seasons and 5 of 6. Remember, he caught 91 passes as a rookie. Saquon is still a really good running back. He just needs a new jersey to wear. Josh Jacobs, number 2 on my list, limited to 13 games last season. Only 1 full season on his NFL resume. RB18 in points per game, 805 yards in his 13 games, but a career low 3.5 yards per carry and just 6 rushing touchdowns. 30-plus grabs, though, in 4 straight seasons, 50-plus twice. Likely time that I'd say they move on. I'd say that the Raiders move on, partly because they don't want to pay Josh Jacobs. Also, Zamir White showed some flashes of greatness down the stretch of the season. They may have something in Zamir White. I think Jacobs is a good back. I think he's a 3-down back. He could be a top 10 running back in fantasy in the right landing spot. Again, good offensive line, good offensive team, somebody that can move the football, can help Josh Jacobs. It's tough when you're stacking boxes because the quarterback can't move the football. Number 1 on this list, it's King Henry. A down year for Derrick Henry. 13.7 fantasy points per game. Just 13.7 was good enough for RB15, RB8 overall, but a big drop off from what we're used to seeing from Henry. 17.9 fantasy points, 23, 20.9, and 19 per game over his last 4 seasons before this past year at 13.7. 280 carries overall, 16.4. May seem like a lot, but in 2022, he averaged 21 carries per game. He averaged 27 in 2021 and 23 in 2020. Only 4.2 yards per carry this year, tied for a career low for him. He had 4.2 as a sophomore. 61 catches on 77 targets, though, over the last 2 seasons, starting to get more involved in the passing game. I still think he has something to offer. There's a lot of tread on the tires. He's had a lot of carries over the past couple of seasons, but on the right team with a good offensive line and a good quarterback, could you imagine him in Dallas, behind the Dallas offensive line? Yes, Derrick Henry would get drafted as a top 5 running back if that was the case. And if he does leave Tennessee, and it does sound like he will, kind of had a little bit of a goodbye message after the last Titans game at home on the mic. Tajay Spears season. I think we can all get excited for Tajay Spears. I'm going to dive into the wide receivers in another episode, but here's a quick little peek at them. T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman Jr., Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Marquise Brown, Curtis Samuel, Odell Beckham Jr., Gabe Davis, and DJ Chark. The names on this list, not as super appealing, but it is top heavy with Higgins, Evans, Pittman Jr. and Ridley. I do believe that the Bengals are going to tag Higgins. I think we could see Evans on a new team. I know he's linked to KC. I don't think they have the Bucks unless he wants to take a significant pay cut to try to go get himself a Super Bowl. But I'd say Tampa tries to get him back too. Him and Baker, right? 1,000 yards every year of his career showed us that he's still very, very solid. I got Pollard. I had Pollard ahead of Swift, but it's really close for me. I got him 6'5", right? It's the same sort of tier. I think Swift is a better runner. They're both pretty good pass catching running backs. It's pretty tight for me. If you can only have one, Ekeler or Swift for your Eagles offense, I really don't want either of those guys. I would like to have a Saquon or a Jacobs, or maybe draft somebody. I want somebody that they can hand the ball off like 20 times. Like, I just think they should get back to running the football behind that offensive line. But I would pick Ekeler. I mean, I think he has a little bit more to offer than Swift. Those would be the two, but we'll see what happens. My predictions, I'll give some predictions for these landing spots. Why not? Let's have some fun with this, and then we'll get out of here. My predictions, let's go Derrick Henry. Let's go Derrick Henry, Dallas. Let's go Josh Jacobs. Let's go Josh Jacobs, Philadelphia. Right? I actually don't think that maybe that's just wishful thinking. I really like Josh Jacobs as a running back. I think he's pretty solid as a running back. The Patriots probably won't bring anybody back. We'll go with Ramondre Stevenson. The Raiders will go with Zamir White. The Chiefs are fine with Pacheco. The Broncos, nobody here. They shouldn't anyways. I think Javonte Williams may get unleashed. The Chargers, I could see Derrick Henry with the Chargers. I would say maybe like a Henry or a Jacobs with the Chargers, although they are really up against the cap. I don't know how much money they can dish out, but I think they want like a guy that can carry the rock like 300 times. And I think Henry and Jacobs could do something like that. I'll just say Henry goes to Dallas. I'll say Jacobs, Philly. I'll say Tony Pollard. Oh man. I'll say Tony Pollard. Let's go Texans. Let's guess Texans there for Tony Pollard. Saquon Barkley for the Texans is a really good potential landing spot as well. I think that's pretty solid. Austin Ekeler, man, where is Austin Ekeler going? I don't know, man. Like, I can't see Dallas. I don't think they want that type of runner. Definitely don't think Carolina. Don't think the Saints. Falcons are set. Bucks are fine. Bears are fine. Vikings probably are in the conversation for one of these running backs, right? I mean, forget the bottom four, but maybe like the Vikings, a Swift, an Ekeler, a Saquon. I think Minnesota's going to be in the conversation for a starting running back to sign, or maybe draft another guy. Detroit is already fine. The Packers could get a Tony Pollard. They could get a Singletary, someone like a change of pace guy with Aaron Jones, because he's had a ton of injuries and they let AJ Dillon walk. Arizona, Seattle, these guys are probably fine, and the Niners and the Rams are fine. The Commanders with Brian Robinson Jr., maybe they get a Singletary here, or up Tony Pollard potentially. The Giants, I'm sure they're going to want to bring back Saquon. They're not going to spend up on anybody else. If it's not Saquon, they don't want to spend on Saquon. So why would they spend on anybody else here? I'm awful at predicting, but I guess I'll say from a fantasy standpoint, like Henry to Dallas or Henry to the Chargers, I think he'd be better as a Cowboy. Jacobs to the Eagles. Saquon to the Eagles, just with that offensive line. One of these running backs in Baltimore as well, the way that they run the football. Could you imagine a Saquon or a Derrick Henry or a Josh Jacobs there? Just a massive boost. They run the ball so well, and no disrespect to Gus Edwards, it would just be a significant boost if they could land one of those top 6 running backs in Baltimore. So that's it. Predictions, I'm awful at them, obviously. So we're going to wrap up right there. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to have some MLB team previews. We'll take a look at the free agency landscape at the wide receiver position. We have a quarterback carousel article that's going to be live this week at FTN Fantasy, where we did make some predictions, myself, Jeff Ratcliffe, Daniel Kelly, Mike Randall, on quarterbacks in landing spots where we think these quarterbacks will end up. There's not a lot of big-time free agent quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is one. Baker Mayfield is another. Ryan Tannehill. But we could see some quarterback movement. Russell Wilson's going to get cut. He's going to be free agent. And we're also going to see Justin Fields maybe potentially traded. It's possible we can see something like that happen as we get closer and closer to free agency and the NFL draft. Thanks, guys, for taking the time to hang out. We have NHL picks over at FTNBets.com. Free article. I tweeted it out. We also have Dangle Bet Selly live as well on our FTN Network YouTube page if you're looking for some NHL action. Good luck on the ice if you are, and we'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one. Cheers.